This is Roger Struckoff with Syscon TV, Day 2 at CloudEXPO West in Santa Clara. Sitting now with Dave Miller at Covisint. And we're going to talk about security. So anyway, thanks for joining us. You mentioned connected vehicles, for example. There's security issues there, I imagine.
Yeah, there's a lot of security issues with the connected vehicle, right? You know, we provide the connected vehicle infrastructure for both Hyundai and OnStar.
Okay.
And as you would think, as vehicles are becoming more autonomous, the issue is, what if somebody hacks in and drives me off the road? And we think we've seen at least some examples of that with a Jeep Cherokee. So the security issue becomes a really big deal with something that weighs 2 tons and goes 70 miles an hour.
You know, I live in the Midwest, and people, whenever they get into an accident, they say a deer ran out in front of me, whether it did or not. But a connected car can't say that.
No, well, and there certainly are issues. You know, there are going to be issues associated not just with the how do you secure it, right? But certainly who has the liability also, right? So you're going to get people now who are going to be like, well, no, my vehicle swerved off the road. It wasn't me. But on the security side of things, the challenge is sometimes, to stick with the car analogy, sometimes we get a little bit ahead of our headlights. And in the race to have more autonomous and more connected lifestyle, we kind of forget about the security aspects of it, right? If you look at the history of the car, seatbelts weren't put in cars until the late 40s, early 50s, and that's not because people weren't dying in car crashes. It was just because we didn't want anything to get in the way of the experience of driving.
Right, and that's the overall issue. It's not just connected cars that you or your company's concerned with. It seems like security in general actually has been a very big topic at the show these last 2 days. I think because of recent well-known incidents that have been occurring at all levels, whether stealing of information, credit card information, or these 2 big DDoS attacks of a couple weeks ago on the IoT. So, are you seeing an increasing awareness that people have to have inbuilt security and think about it first instead of as a sort of add-on?
Yeah, more and more, right? We've been going to these types of conferences because of our connected vehicle connection, certainly for about the last 3 years or so. And in the beginning, I think it was much more of the, hey, ain't it cool that I can have this connected thing? I think we're seeing more and more of the, and let me tell you why it is secure. The challenge is because these are hardware devices, building security in oftentimes has a large cost thing. So if you use a light bulb as an example, right? It could cost you to be able to put a secure enclave into a light bulb, right? That could be $10 worth of hardware. Well, $10 worth of hardware in a light bulb is probably more hardware than you want to put into a light bulb. And so you're not going to do that. It's different in a vehicle, for example, right? So if you're going to pay $60,000 for a car, then you're probably okay with adding $10 to the cost of it. And so we're seeing more and more, and we're seeing some really interesting new vendors, right, who are building hardware modules that are secure, that are less and less expensive than the kind of things that you normally would have.
What sort of process do you go through when you're designing security for connected cars? What sort of threats do you have to think about, and what sort of measures do you take to secure them?
So our point of view is this idea that certainly in connected vehicle, but I think in a lot of IoT, the idea of a permission response model, right? And what that really means is, as opposed to security being implied based upon the devices, what the device is, the device has to ask permission in order to do anything, right? And what that does is that allows you to now have a centralized area, right, where you can do auditing. You can look at what is happening, right? You can make decisions in real time about whether it makes sense for this device to be asking permission for this thing, right? Should my car be asking permission whether or not it can start itself at 2 o'clock in the morning, for example, if the system knows that I'm traveling in Hawaii? right? So as we kind of bring more and more of that capability in, right? As a cloud vendor, right? So I don't actually manufacture the stuff, the actual stuff. So I'm not the car manufacturer, I'm not the thing manufacturer, right? I am the methodology by which they can decide whether or not they can do something or not do something. So the areas that we focus on are things like encrypted transport, authentication, right? The provisioning of what a device can do and can't do.
Is there any real-time aspect to this? I mean, clearly a car is existing in real time, and a lot of what's going on in the computer systems are. But with what you do, are there real-time and performance implications of what you're doing that you worry about?
Yeah, so performance is a real big deal, right? Yeah. So, one of the things is if you want to implement this idea of a permission response model, right? The problem is, well, if a device is going to make 1,000 requests to do something in a second, it can't ask 1,000 times for permission, right? And so we've designed some things like tokens that have longer lifetime, right? So I'll use the vehicle as an example, right? When the car starts, right, the different modules in the vehicle all ask at once whether they can have permission to behave in the way that they believe. These are the things that I want to be able to do, right? We give back a token that is good for the whole drive. They don't ever ask again, right? Now, the advantage of this is what we can do is if your car is stolen, we can shut the permission down. So when your car starts, right, and the engine control module says, is it okay if I turn the pistons over? We can say, no, it's not, because the car was reported stolen, for example, right? So those sorts of permission response things can help with that sort of thing. Or maybe what you do is you shut something off because there's been some sort of a warranty issue, right? So I'm not going to let you engage autonomous driving because we've had an issue with our autonomous module or that sort of thing.
So how much should I worry about someone hacking it and driving me into a ditch, and what are you doing about that?
So I think today it is not something that we really need to worry an unbelievable amount. Right? The way that I like thinking about it is we've had lots of methods for people to be able to basically cut your brake lines and make it so your brakes don't work. And there is not a rash of people, right? I'd never get asked the question saying, well, should I be worried about the fact that if somebody cuts my brake lines, I could die because that? It's like, well, probably not. Okay, and that's been around forever and ever and ever, right? So I am not unbelievably worried that there is going to be this sort of thing. That the challenge is going to be when we have more and more connected vehicles, right? When a larger percentage is there, and I don't know that it'll be as much an individual item, right? Like someone's trying to go after you, it would be much, much more state-sponsored terrorism sort of thing, right? If I could make every vehicle at 9 o'clock in the morning in New York City slam on its brakes simultaneously, that'd be a big deal.
That's a big incident, and so that's sort of long-term stuff that you're worried about. Short-term, you're looking at the system you have is having to ask permission really is going to knock out a lot of the prevent a lot of the threats.
Yeah, and the other thing our system does is it takes care of another. So there's two aspects. Part of security is the keeping people out, right? Okay, and that's kind of what we've been talking about. How do I keep bad guys out from doing things, right? But a big part of security is letting the right people in. Okay, so for example, I'd like to be able to remote start my car. Okay, but one of the things that is also related to security is the whole identity management space. Okay, and what that is related to is the fact that at some point in time I'm going to sell my car, and my guess is the guy who bought my car probably doesn't want me to be able to start it anymore.
He would like to be for him to start it, but probably not you.
And so that ability to deprovision ourselves from the things we own is going to become a really big deal. And we don't think about that a lot. It's isn't it great that you have a connection to the door lock on your house, for example. But when I sell that house, again, how do I remove that capability?
Deprovision. I hadn't thought of that. So that's right. So he's thinking about it. His company's thinking about it. How do they find Covisint online?
So we're at the website www.covisint.com, and you can we really have all our information there.
Beautiful. Thanks for joining us. I learned something. And thanks for watching. For Syscon TV, this is Roger Struckoff.